Welcome to meeting number 27 of the Standing Committee of the House of Commons on Human Resources, Skills and Social Development and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. The website will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. Conformément à l'article
Pursuant to Section 108 and the motion adopted by the committee on Wednesday, October 28, 2020, the committee will resume its study of the review of the Employment Insurance Program. And now I would like to welcome our witnesses. To begin our discussion with 5 minutes of opening remarks followed by a round of questions. We have with us Marie-Hélène Dubé, criminologist and founder of the 15 Weeks is Not Enough campaign. And we also have Pierre Serré from the Conseil national des chômeurs et chômeuses. I would like to make some observations for our witnesses. Interpretation services offered for this video conference are similar to the services provided during regular committee meetings. At the bottom of your screen, you can choose between floor, English, or French. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you're not speaking, your microphone should be on mute. We will start with Ms. Dubé. For 5 minutes, please. The floor is yours. Good afternoon, Chair, and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. For those of you who don't know me, I am the one who initiated the 15 Weeks is Not Enough campaign. I myself faced cancer 3 times in 2009 and faced this sick benefits EI program and provisions that had not changed in 1971. So since then, I collected with this petition some 620,000 signatures. The petition is still active, and it's allowed me to understand the reality on the ground. So my reaction to yesterday's budget. I would like to talk today about my incomprehension in the face of the measure of 26 weeks. You'll recall in 2019, the budget director had conducted a study on the feasibility of implementing the 50 weeks of sickness benefits, and it was indeed feasible. So we also were able to see in this study that of those who exhaust their 15 weeks, some 77% of these people need a minimum of 41 weeks. So by instituting 26 weeks, we're excluding 23% of sick Canadians. Why would we put in place a measure that is inadequate and that is outdated? Asking 50 weeks is something that is well documented by experts, and it has been supported from the beginning by healthcare organizations, the public, labor unions, advocacy groups. So we see in public opinion that the public is extremely favorable to this amendment. So it's very difficult for me to understand the measure in the budget. There are many arguments that keep coming back, but I would like to spend my 5 minutes by dwelling on 2 points, which I think is very important and we don't hear enough about. First, to maintain legislation like this, that it be 15 or 26 weeks, it is very expensive. The costs are high. So we can acknowledge that the cost is high. But when you're sending a family to live in poverty, you end up also sending them to social assistance and programs of last resort, where they remain for 20 years. Often they're stuck in poverty. So we have this phenomenon of transmission of poverty intergenerationally, and it can be a minimum of 3 up to 7 generations. So the issue starts with just one family, but with the intergenerational transmission, you end up affecting many families. So an example of intergenerational poverty is, let's say it's 7 generations, you'd end up with 1,015 families that would be affected. So you end up with a huge problem which could have been avoided from the beginning. So we talk never about sickness. We talk about access to affordable housing, but we tend to neglect sickness. A 2016 federal report on socioeconomic inequalities shows that you can have a direct annual economic burden of at least $6.2 billion. This is all due to sickness and the consequences. So the people that arise from the 15-week issue do not make up 100% of the statistic, but they are a non-negligible part of it. Second, I want to talk about lost earnings. All of these tens of thousands of people, these numerous families, they will no longer pay taxes. They're no longer going to be contributing to the economy as active citizens. And so that creates a huge loss of earnings for the government. And that is something that needs to be taken into account in all of the calculations. And all too often, that is neglected. Yet it is significant. So that is what I wanted to do today. I wanted to raise your awareness about some of these other issues so that you can reflect on these, so that we can try to arrive at a measure that is satisfactory and not neglect those who are most marginalized. The more you neglect these people, the more sick they will be. I say that I'm very proud of living in a country like Canada, where we allow people now to die with dignity. But it is very, very sad that we are leaving people get mediocre treatment and have people just condemned to survive in poverty. We are an OECD country, after all. So I would like to be able to be proud of a country that meets the needs of all people. We'd like to really make a difference. Thank you. That's my contribution. Thank you very much, Madame Dubé. Could you please just raise your microphone slightly? We just had a message from the interpreters that there's an adjustment needed to your microphone. Thank you so much. Next, Pierre Serry. Welcome to the committee, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much, members of the committee, for your invitation. I would like to say that we've sent you a document in the 2 languages. Given the budget yesterday, there are some adjustments, but we've updated recent figures and some of the income, the names of some of the income replacement programs. First, what I want to tell you is that we agree with the government's objective to reform the Employment Earned program, just as it was stated at the beginning of the year with Minister Qualtroux's mandate. So we want to make sure that workers in the country are better protected when unemployed. So the measures announced in the budget, are still temporary in nature, but we know two things. First, that the health crisis and its serious repercussions on the world of work have revealed the flaws of the EI program, because the program literally collapsed in the spring of 2020 before getting it back on track at the end of September, thanks to more relaxed measures that were very welcome. And these conclusions were shared by a recent report of the International Monetary Fund. The second thing we know is that if this social program crashed last year, it's essentially because of the many cost-cutting measures that were imposed during the 90s, more specifically between 1990 and 1996, under two different successive governments. The last 25 to 30 years have been lived under this leaden shroud. So the employment insurance has been in a straitjacket. It hasn't been able to play its proper role. And since 2001, the Standing Committee on Human Resources, according to our evaluation, held 72 official meetings to study the employment insurance program and heard from some 289 witnesses, probably more, and heard dozens and dozens of briefs. And the committee produced some 20 unanimous reports. I myself have appeared several times before this committee and the Finance Committee. So much has been said, much has been discussed. All of the stones have been turned, and we all know, you know, and I know what the problems are and what the solutions are. So at the National Council of Unemployed Workers, and you can find this information on our website. We have a platform that is based on studies and international compares, the fruit of many discussions within our organization. So we have a platform that is both theoretical and based on many years of practical experience. So the public wants things to change. Last year, we did a study on the social safety net, and a few weeks ago, the resolution EI 21. We've never stopped our work. But I'm not here to defend in a dogmatic fashion one or another aspect of our platform. I'm here to try to institute justice, a 21st century EI program, one that meets people's needs. So we're seeking two objectives: expanding the present coverage, and second, improving the protection of workers. When we talk about the expansion of the coverage, we want to extend it to areas of the world of work that are currently not covered, such as self-employment. So that represents 3 million people. We want better access for those who are ill-protected, and we're thinking here of part-timers. 20% of the active population, 2/3, are women. Think of seasonal workers in certain regions of the country, and think of the indigenous communities. So there is a need to improve access with universal criteria, taking into account these realities. So expanding coverage is also relaxing, and not in a temporary way, which is what we have now. We want to relax the serious sanctions linked to invalid reasons for ending employment. Since when would you refuse to pay benefits to someone who has worked and paid into the program? So improving the protection of workers means reflecting on premium rates, how they're calculated, benefit periods, the duration of sickness benefits. It also means that the application process needs to be simplified through easy-to-follow regulations, because the program has become needlessly complex. So you have to aim at these two objectives: with the conviction and sincerity of people who know that absolute perfection does not exist. But with the measures announced in yesterday's budget, things are temporary in nature, which is not normal. And I reiterate what was said at the very beginning. All, stones have not been left unturned. Solutions have been proposed. I almost feel like saying, just do it now. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Serret. Now let's begin with our round of questions. Let's begin with the Conservatives, Mr. Généreux. 6 minutes, Mr. Généreux. Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Serret, keep it simple and stupid, maybe I should add. So we want to make the measures permanent, but we want to keep them simple. So thanks to the committee for welcoming here. I'm a special guest, I would say. Thank you, Marie-Hélène Dubé. You are from my riding originally, so thank you, Marie-Hélène, for being here. I much appreciate you being in attendance. Given what we've heard yesterday in the budget, but what we already need, and the number of weeks available for sickness going from 15 to 26 weeks. The government had announced it now for several weeks, and now it's in the budget. So it's become a reality. So my understanding is the government will change the legislation to make the 26 weeks valid. So, Marie-Hélène, you had 3 cancers over a 5-year period. You had access to 15 weeks. And now, without going into any detail, what have been the difference for you if you had access to 50 or 52 weeks? Because let's be frank, and I understand the attendance of Madame Chabot, who presented a bill asking for 50 weeks, and where we also had adopted at our Saint-Hyacinthe convention, where you were in attendance, Marie-Hélène, a proposal from my own association, which is to go to 52 weeks. Now, the Conservative Convention, not so long ago, adopted the same resolution to go from 15 to 52 weeks. So what would that have changed for you in your life? And I don't want to go into the financial details of your life, but so if you'd had 50 weeks, how would that have helped you? Thanks for that question. It is a good question. For me, it would have made a huge difference in many ways. The first time I got 15 weeks, and by the way, I am an employee of the federal government on contracts, short-term contracts. The first time I had 15 weeks, but I was very ill. We didn't even know that I was going to survive, and I became very indebted. The second time, I realized it made no sense, and I went back to work much too soon. So I did not follow my doctor's advice, and I fell ill again very quickly. If I'd had the time to take care of myself, take care of the kids, it would have been different. Then when I came with my third relapse with very serious consequences, I hadn't worked a sufficient number of hours to get the 15 weeks, so I had to postpone a surgery and work full-time until the eve of the surgery. And I had been told I should be on rest 2 months prior to the surgery, which I could not do, and I was very indebted. I had a home. I remortgaged it 3 times. And if I hadn't had the house, I would have ended up on welfare, and no doubt forever. So yeah, 50 weeks would have made a huge difference. And so if, we'd cut back on I just imagine if you could increase the number of weeks, you would help people with their treatment. I mean, we know 1 out of 2, 1 out of 3 people end up with cancer or a heart disease or mental health. So people can get treatment. It's just they need a system to support them to get that treatment. So in answer to your question, it would have made a huge difference. What you've just explained, Marie-Hélène, aside from the direct financial impact, not having more than 15 weeks, what it means for people who are very ill is that they end up taking decisions that worsens their health. And I think that's what is or makes it worse, because the fact that you have no income, no regular income, I mean, of course, that it's not all of your income that is made up with employment benefits. But the thing is, it does put a lot of pressure on people, and they end up making decisions that fly in the face of their good health. Just 30 seconds. Yes, well, it is very costly. It's costly in human terms. So you have to think of the repercussions, and people do then develop complications like depression, and ends up being a lot more costly because you're far more ill, and it's all of society that becomes more impoverished. Mr. Chair, don't you have your orange and red cards like some of your colleagues who chair committees? Normally, I hold up my hand, but this time I forgot to do so. Mr. Housefather, 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a chairman that is and a colleague that's so respected that no card was necessary. I'd like to salute your courage, Ms. Dubé. Not only your courage, but the fact you have found a personal situation that you have used to help society. And Mr. Serret, I'd like to salute you for your perseverance. It's incredible to know that you've been here since 2011 for this very same issue. And I would note that I believe this is the very first time since 1971 that the program has been improved on the whole issue of sickness benefit and the addition of the 11 weeks from 15 to 26 weeks. So that's a step ahead. Ms. Dubé, you said it was only 23% of people who apply. It's 100% for the adjustment that will get 26% and not 15. Maybe it's not enough for 73% of people, but it will help everyone for the percentage that has been increased. I have several questions. Mr. Serret, you issued a press release yesterday saying that there have been major advances in the budget, and you also issued another press release saying that you were not satisfied because the measures in terms of the universal minimum is temporary for a maximum of 1 year. Consultations will be held later this year, but I understand that you're tired and fed up with consultations. Do you have an opinion on the whole issue of the coverage of self-employed workers? We hold consultations. Of course, they should be added to the employment benefit. Could you give us advice on who should be added in those consultations, and what's the number of hours we should use as a basis? Mr. Housefather, I would tell you that as part of this crisis, temporary measures have been put in place. The employment insurance program of last year wasn't able to play its role. And you know, though, that as well as I do. It collapsed. The offices were closed. The phone lines were closed. Everything was absolutely collapsing. And the government had, in a few days, make up a plane while the plane was flying, a program called SERB. And it did the job. Let us not forget, Mr. Housefather, that there were 9 million people that at one stage of the game lost their jobs. 9 million citizens, 45% of the population, of the active population. So The government reacted very quickly, had to react very quickly, and was able to do it with the SUR benefit that ended in September. And then the government thought about things and put in place programs that were sustainable. Those who are not entitled to employment insurance, and we get salaried employees to employment insurance for 1 year. And then there were extensions, etc. But as of now, we expect, because we are going towards a transition and for a recovery. So we have to think about the employment insurance, not terms on temporary measures, and we've been holding all kinds of pilot projects. And I'm not stupid, and my colleagues isn't stupid either. And we've looked into this budget yesterday. We listened to commentators, journalists, and observers of the public side, actors from civil society, and we all understood that the government would initiate, as of next August, a unique single criteria for a permanent measure, 420 hours. It made the headlines. Why? Because in this kind of a budget, in this kind of a document, they use a language that doesn't mean much. We either don't understand, or we understand what we want to understand. There are many people that understood that we were putting in place 420 hours. And when we understood after 24 hours that it was a temporary measure, we figured, look, these consultations have been held. You told me since 2011. Not since 2011. I've been appearing before your committee since 2011. I've been working in this group for unemployed people for the last 40 years. Initially, in 79, we call this the call-in measures by the name of the minister, but the 70s were terrible. And the government of Jean Chrétien, the government of the Conservative government, was terrible for the employment insurance. And for 30 years, this system has been in a straitjacket. You yourself at the Human Resources Committee, you see I'm upset. Okay, I can also calm down, rest assured. But it's your own committee that has looked into tens of reports, studies on employment insurance. We know what the solutions are. So please implement them. Your government knows what the solutions are. Please go ahead slowly, if necessary, one stage at a time, but let's do it in a more firm way. Let's be transparent and clear with the public as well. That's what I'm saying. I think I've run out of time. And yes, you're absolutely right. Your time's up. I'm sure Ms. Chabot is happy that Mr. Serret said block by blocks. Ms. Chabot, you have the floor for the next 6 minutes. I will not answer Anthony because I don't want to waste any time. And I would tell you, Pierre Serret, Ms. Dubé, greetings. Thank you for being with us. And for those of you who do not know you, I know who you are, and I'd like to pay tribute to your stamina and for the fight you've put up for employment insurance in Quebec. And, of course, it will affect all Canadian workers across Canada. I won't say do it, although do it is fine. I'd say go. And I fully agree with what you said. For years now, we've seen the employment insurance system shrinking rather than becoming stronger, and with the addition of the crisis we're in. My first question would be for you, Ms. Dubé. You have given very strong arguments that do indicate that it should be 50 weeks. There is one thing I'd like you to tackle, the whole issue of equity. It's a question of equity because what we are referring to here, we're talking about workers, males and females, who pay contributions to employment insurance, who've been paying those contributions throughout their lives, and that for 50 years now are subject to discrimination, are not being dealt with fairly. vis-à-vis workers who lose their jobs. Thank you for your question. It's a very good question. And indeed, we have to consider that point. And workers do pay contributions, and for years, and everybody pays the same amount. But once a problem occurs, well, all of a sudden we don't have the same coverage. We don't see this elsewhere in other types of insurance. It's just as if you have car insurance, everybody pays for the car insurance. Oh, somebody, somebody hit you on the left side, we won't pay as much as you expect. Everybody pays basically the same amount, but no, you will only get 15 weeks, and then you'll end up being poor. So it's a matter of equity, fairness, and discrimination. Why would people who have contributed the same amount, why wouldn't they be entitled to the same coverage to then become full-fledged active citizens? This is a very important point, and it's a matter of trust. Since 2009, I've said that 620,000 signatures, and I don't know why the government is ignoring all this and pretending nothing happened. Because prior to the Liberals being in power, I had worked with Denis Coderre on a bill that had gone very far for the 52 weeks, and then everybody was in favor back then. And the public trust is important. And I had a private meeting with Mr. Trudeau and Minister Qualtrough in December 2019, and it was clearly agreed during that meeting that the 26 weeks were inadequate and that they would go back, do their homework, and come back to us with a proposal. Here again, this issue of trust. And last point, COVID. We talk about COVID. Everybody will end up with some complications. Will end up with complications. They won't be able to access the 26 weeks. Temporary measures. If we put it at 50 weeks, as we said, we can also include those people who will have suffered from COVID. We've demonstrated it's doable. We have the money. It's the workers' money. Everything's been looked into. Just do it. And the 26 weeks, I fail to understand equity, trust, and humanity to allow those people to earn a good to live.
Mr. Serré, temporary measures, yes. We too believe with the 420 hours, the 26 weeks that became something else, but temporary measures. I think that your work on the reform of L21, well, there were conditions there. I think you hoped that there were measures that would become permanent, because these temporary measures will come to an end in September 2021. So could we build something based on that? Well, definitely. We can build on that. We know what the problems are. We know what the difficulties are with relaxing measures, but we think that as of September of 2021, and it's not too late, because right for now, these are announcements, budgetary announcements, but it is not too late to do things properly and institute permanent measures in terms of eligibility, universality with one single criterion and not I don't know how many regions. So it's these one single eligibility criterion for regular and special conditions. So yes, September, and we have temporary measures for employment measures, but what about those who are not even entitled? There are huge concerns there because we have many self-employed, and CERB was extended, but it too will end in September. What comes next? So employment insurance coverage and the mandate the minister has to revisit the program is with a view to extending it to self-employed. But September's just around the corner. I was expecting there to be, a project that would be made public, and it would be intended to cover self-employed. The crisis is not over. There's a transition to a recovery, but we're just at the very beginning. And as to the self-employed are the first to realize that come September, if there's nothing, it's a serious problem. Think of agriculture. Well, all of the sectors with self-employed, it's a large number of people. So we need permanent measures when it comes to EI, and those measures need to be extended to protect the self-employed. Thank you, Mr. Serré. And now Ms. Gazan, 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair. And I'd like to welcome our witnesses here today. My first question is for Madame Dubé. First of all, thank you for sharing your story. As somebody who comes from a family of, people who have had cancer, as we all have, I think your story is common. I agree with you. Certainly 15 weeks are not enough. You mentioned 26 weeks, not enough. I agree with you on that. I also have concerns that you raised, particularly around COVID-19. We talk about people having COVID-19, but we don't talk about the long-term impacts of that in terms of health implications, even after somebody recovers from COVID-19 but are left with serious health implications. Why is it so critical in light of your personal story, but certainly in light of the pandemic that we're currently in, to expand the number of sick weeks even further?
Oui, merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. Yes, that is important. And speaking of COVID, I'm going to give you a very simple example. My youngest, my son, he's 22, firefighter in excellent shape. COVID back in September, he was so ill. He was the first to be surprised, and it took many weeks, several months, before he was fit again, and he was in excellent shape. So we're seeing all kinds of different cases involving young people and some not so young who have spent more than 6 months with COVID-related health issues. So with 26 weeks, are we actually telling all those people, the 77%, are we telling them that they too will be condemned to social assistance programs and all of the long-term consequences and getting caught up in a system? That is an aspect we should not be neglecting. As Pierre said, there are many unknowns, but we are seeing their consequences with COVID. It's affecting all age groups, including the active population. Are we going to be pushing those people into poverty as well? And I'd like to raise another point, because I often hear the government say, well, we're not going to leave anybody behind. We're going to be there for all Canadians. But those people are ill and exhausted their 15 weeks. What is to happen to them? It is terrible. We have to think of them. For all of these reasons, we need an amendment. We need changes to meet today's needs, not replace it with something else that's inadequate and just spin our wheels. Let's put in place something adequate that will even help people living with the consequences of COVID. We can't continue with temporary measures alone. We need. Thank you.
And
just a second, Ms.
I
Gazan.
agree with you completely.
Ms.
One of the
Gazan,
reasons I've been pushing for a permanent guaranteed livable basic income. I don't think.
Ms. Gazan, excuse me for 1 second. Madame Dubé, pouvez-vous lever votre micro un peu?
Madame Dubé, could you please raise your microphone closer to your nose and say a few words? Ms. Dubé, could you just test your microphone again, please? You're on mute. Are you speaking to me? Yes, I was talking to you. Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were talking to Miss Gazan. Could you raise the microphone a little closer to your nose? Thank you. Thank you. Sorry for that delay.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, one of the reasons that I've been pushing for a guaranteed livable basic income, arguing we can't assume that everybody is able to work. And for those who cannot work, they shouldn't be destined to a life of poverty. And so I really appreciate what you shared today. Monsieur Charest, is that how you pronounce your last name? Je parle anglais et je
I'm English speaking. I apologize.
So some of the things that in your brief you spoke about is proposing adopting universal criteria for EI eligibility. You spoke a little bit about that today in committee today. Can you explain why the expansion of coverage is important and what recommendations, in addition to some very quickly that you've already discussed, you would add?
Historically, I'd say until 1990, the EI program had very good coverage. Until 1990, more than some 80 or 85% of workers were protected and covered by the EI program. If they lost their job, they could expect to get unemployment benefits, as we called them then. Then with all the cuts between 1990 and 1996, the system was broken. And I think that it was the government's goal, those governments of that period of time, was to prevent access to the program. And I think it was, an accounting exercise. But that plan was broken. Access to it became more difficult. And in 96, when employment insurance took the place of unemployment insurance, it took a lot more time to qualify. So this meant that part-timers, 20% of the active population, two-thirds of whom are women, were ejected from the system. The figures are there on the record. So, you have a big problem there. So we need one single eligibility system. We have many, many different types of work, part-time, seasonal, self-employed. We need to meet their needs. The 420-hour criteria is excellent, but instead of making it a temporary measure, you need to make it a permanent measure. And I will end by saying that Canada is the only country in the world that have EI programs that has the eligibility criteria based on residence, where you live. Where you live makes you have X eligibility or Y access.
So much, and I agree with you. I don't think we've ever recovered from the austerity of the 1990s. At number one, and it's dunked people deeper and deeper into poverty. You spoke a little bit about.
Thanks, Ms. Kazan.
Shoot. Okay.
Thank you.
Hopefully, I'll have a chance next round. Sorry.
Yeah. No. Monsieur Généreux, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Seri, I'm an employer. I have some 30 employees. It'll be now 30 years. So employers and employees share the costs of employment insurance. It's not the government that assumes the cost. It's a cost shared by employers and employees. And you said, society has evolved in the last 30 years or 20 years since you've been waging this fight. And I know that COVID has changed a great deal. And I know you would have liked the COVID-related measures to become permanent rather than remain temporary. Have you done an assessment of the costs for the employers and employees if you took the 420 hours as the basis across Canada and turned it into a permanent measure? So, and we would add the self-employed, the contractual workers. Has there been an assessment of costs done by your team or by the government? Sorry for my ignorance. This is not ignorance, Mr. Généreux, but I would say if you were to go into the archives of human resources, you would find lots of figures. Let me give you an example. So contribution rates at 158 are some of the lowest in history. In 2008, 2009, at the last financial crisis, I was on a radio program with economists, sort of right-wing economists from the Institut de Montréal, and we were discussing with Michael Ignatieff a system of 360 hours, and that to get through the financial crisis of the day. And the economist saying, so no, we can't. It's going to cost too much in premiums. So I asked, what about, the rates? What is the contribution? $2 for. But I said, no, I've done a study since 72. It used to be 173. So you think at $2, it's not so bad that we shouldn't increase it. You can increase and solve the problem. So we talked about sickness benefits earlier, and the director of budget said to go from 15 to 50 weeks with a 6-cent increase of the employee premium. So 158. So no one's going to throw themselves off the bridge with that kind of an increase. But let me reiterate my question. Do we have any evidence as we speak? Because as an entrepreneur, the problems we've had since the advent of COVID is to find workers. We have 500-600 jobs available, well-paying jobs, 15 to 25 the hour. But many have ended up on CERB after losing their jobs. And I'm not going to say they've taken advantage. I don't like those words. But they stayed on STIRP right until it ended and until they had access to employment insurance benefits and have not gone back to work even if they've had the possibility. Now, the businesses, and I'm thinking of one in particular, can no longer find workers. And this is for $18 an hour jobs. And they're thinking of relocating to the United States, because there's also a problem with immigration. But there are costs associated to this. Yes, and the cost has been huge since the beginning of the crisis. So $200 billion has been spent on income replacement programs since March 15th, 2020. So that's more than 10 years of EI budget. But millions and millions have been spent. So just think in 2020, 9 million people lost their jobs. I'm not saying it was not necessary. I'm not saying it was not necessary. But to be the devil's advocate, there's $100 billion saved by Canadians since the beginning of the pandemic. So there's a lot of money in the economy now. But it's not from CERB, because that's equivalent to minimum wage. So 40 hours minimum wage pays more than CERB's. If people have saved, it's because they couldn't travel, they couldn't spend, they couldn't consume, they couldn't go out to dinner. I myself have spent less money, but that money has been reintroduced into the neighborhood economy. People have gone to your business to buy, and they often did it as unemployed. Be it money from EI or CERB, money is reintroduced directly into the economy. My time is up. I would have liked to continue this discussion. Thank you, Mr. Généreux. And Mr. Serré.
Mr. Dong, please, for 5.
Mr. Dong.
Chair, and I want to thank both witnesses for coming to the committee today, and to Monsieur Sirig, I will allow you to continue that discussion because I very much agree with what you just said. You know, I think I've been in constant communication with my friends across the world, and coming from some of the regions that's experiencing a terrible outbreak during this wave, and my friends are telling me the part of the reason why is because workers don't have financial support from their government. They don't have coverage. They don't have a choice but to go to work and provide for their family. So I think earlier on, last March, the government had made a very clear, and I think it was a very decisive decision to make sure the personal financial support is in place. And we can see, and I agree with you, almost 9 million Canadians who lost their jobs due to COVID. It has a substantial coverage in terms of income, and had that not been in place, we probably end up in a very worse situation, especially during the first wave. And we heard a lot of concerns about that, a lot of debate about that, the cost of it. People may game the system, and because everything has to happen very, very quickly in a matter of weeks. And we heard that during the debate. So sometimes I'm unclear, even now, where my honorable, conservative members stand on these issues. We kind of hear conflicting comments on these. So one thing I learned the last year is that I always go by their votes. So I do appreciate at the end of the day, all parties worked together and got those support through very, very quickly prior to last summer. So which is fantastic. And one of the things that we noticed that is in the transition from CERB to CRB is that the system was intended to be very flexible, to be inclusive of those that normally wouldn't qualify for previous EI under EI system. I just want to get your thoughts and your feedback, perhaps through you, from your membership on how these flexibility benefited them, or more importantly, benefit the workforce of our country.
Vous me posez la question à moi?
Yes, for
Are you asking me the question? Well, it benefited everybody in the world of work who found themselves paralyzed by COVID. So the problem started last year. Some of the repercussions are very serious. Look what's happening in Ontario. So these income replacement programs offered to the public are courageous measures, and they were necessary measures. You will never let your public down. Don't let down the citizens of this country. Especially last year, at the time of CERB, EI and all of its many variations was set aside, and one single benefit based on good faith, and some 9 million people found themselves unemployed and were able to benefit from the program. So that was then replaced. And Marie-Hélène Dubé had said that as of the new program, people who were sick and who are only entitled to 15-minute sick benefits and cannot, show that they're able to work, they're not entitled to EI, and they're not entitled to the COVID-related income replacement program. So there is a gap, and that needs to be fixed, and it's not too late to do so. The 26 of sick benefits that is going to be put in place, that's only as of August 2022. Why wait until next year, August 2022, when in the current framework, there have been all kinds of temporary measures and with extensions and so forth, and we could move more quickly, and that needs to be done. So we demand 55 weeks, and a universal 50 weeks. But there's been, progress, and we welcome those, but it's not enough. And we're going to continue to wage the fight until it becomes 50 weeks.
Brought up Ontario, and of course, Ontario, the conversation about the sickness benefit coverage is very much alive. I'm actually pretty encouraged to see that in the budget, the increase in coverage. I want to ask you that if you have
Mr.
any.
Dong, you're out of time.
Oh,
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Madame
Thank you,
Chabot pour 2 minutes et demie.
Madame Chabot? Madame Chabot? Chair? 2 minutes and a half. Thank you very much. One thing is clear, and I think we can agree, and the witness have said this, that status quo is no longer possible. And that's why we're conducting the study. It's worrisome that in September, which is around the corner, that the temporary measures will come to an end. And also for the 26 weeks sick benefits, which won't be till 2022. The Supreme Court stated that the purpose of employment insurance is not just to keep people out of poverty, but it is also to help the labor market. So we've talked about the funding of the system. What concerns me about the budget is that we're going to try to keep this balance for some 7 years. Think back to the beginning of the plan. I mean, you're going to end up with a big deficit, a small surplus, and then you will be balanced. It will depend on the contributions by employees and employers, which can vary. But when the plan was put in place, there was a government that also contributed. So, Mr. Serret, do you think that might be a possible solution? Yes, it could be a potential solution. But the plan needs to protect workers. And, of course, it also has to be affordable. So when the government withdrew its support from the fund, you have now a 40-60 sims. We could envisage going back to funding the plan. There are different formulas that are possible. I've often heard employer associations say, we're not completely in disagreement with you. You people are out in the field. You know what the needs are there, and we can support a system, but we think we're paying too much. So can things be rejigged? Yes, could be. We need a genuine plan to protect workers, but we also need to cover the expenses of the plan. So I think Ms. Chabot, what Ms. Chabot has said, is something that's envisageable. And what about self-employed? Because we have groups saying that self-employed might not be well served. Well, they're mistaken. Just think of the Quebec parental leave program. We're the only provincial government that had the courage to make it mandatory, and self-employed workers are covered. They do pay a contribution, which is somewhat between what the workers pay. I have some numbers on my desk for the Quebec parental leave program. So when employers say, well, we're going to end up paying for the self-employed, they're wrong. You just have to look at Quebec's parental leave program. Thank you.
Ms. Gazan, please, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair. Monsieur Charest, the last round you began speaking about models in other countries, EI models that they're using in other countries for self-employed. I'm wondering if you could point to maybe 2 specific models, international models, that we should perhaps consider implementing in Canada?
Je vous avouerai que
I have to say that this topic is vast. In the document we gave you, both in the French and English versions, in the annexes at the back, you'll see a study we did on the coverage of self-employed around the world. Australia, Belarus, Denmark, France, Greece, many different countries. 4 pages on some of these regular plans or voluntary based, but there are many countries, both in the north and the south, and we even have some data on Kazakhstan, and they have these plans for self-employed. There are many different formulae, and this is a broad debate, but employers in Canada could perhaps base themselves on the CRB, the Canada Recovery Benefit, not in all of its detail, maybe not the same $500, and other details can be different, but the framework could inspire us for a permanent program for self-employed. And I think that that is where we are at now as a society in the 21st century. Thank you, Mr. Serré. Ms. Gazan. Colleagues, that is the time we had allocated for this panel. So thank you for your passion, your expertise, which is quite clear, and the long history that you've been working on these issues, the many years. Your contributions have been very helpful for our study. Thank you sincerely for having joined us. We'll now suspend and get ready for the next panel. We're now suspended. Thanks.
dans le cadre de son étude de l'examen de régime d'assurance emploi.
Today, the committee is meeting on its study of the review of the employment insurance program. I would like to make a few comments.
So, a few instructions. Before taking the floor, please turn on your mic. Interpretation services offered for this video conference are similar to those offered during regular sessions of the committee. At the bottom of your screen, you can choose between the floor, English, or French.
Speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses to continue our discussion with 5 minutes of opening remarks, followed by questions. We have with us today David Gray, Professor of Economics at the University of Ottawa, et le Conseil d'intervention pour l'accès des femmes au travail, Kimian Brown, coordinatrice droit du travail, et Ruth Rose, membre de ce conseil. We will begin with Mr. Gray for 5 minutes. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Gray. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casey. Okay. The title of my very, very brief presentation this afternoon is Employment Insurance Reforms for the Post-Pandemic Period. So, my first point that I would like to raise is that this pandemic was a once-in-a-century catastrophe, and the economic impact of this pandemic has also been quite distinct from that of the previous recession of 2008-2009, for example. And hopefully, when I say once in a century, I hope we won't have to. I hope that we have to wait more than a century into the future before something like this happens again. But I'm assuming that the labor market recovery, in fact, the economic recovery, will be nearly complete by the end of this year, 2021. And so the first point I would like to assert is that we should not implement major and permanent reforms to the EI regime in the post-pandemic period based on what's happened right now in the pandemic era labor market. Having said that, I think that there are definitely some lessons to be learned in the pandemic-induced recession. Now, it was a depression for 2 or 3 months in the spring of the year 2020. I'm assuming that much of the recovery will be done by the end of this year. So I'm going to talk about reforms under those premises. So regarding the fallout, the rate of long-term unemployment has risen substantially. Canada has generally fared quite well compared to many other countries as far as long-term unemployment is concerned. So I fear that some workers will be laid off permanently. So we are going to have to allocate more resources towards retraining, skills development, literacy, and essential skills for those workers who will never be able to return to their prior jobs. This, I note, is an ongoing challenge of targeting workers at the periphery of the labor market with efficacious employment benefit and support measures. I'd also like to talk about a topic that was brought up in the prior session. Gig workers. We all know that gig workers in certain occupations have been hit very, very hard by this pandemic. including my younger daughter, who aspires to be an opera diva in this live entertainment industry. She has had her career put on hold for at least a 2-year period. So I want to address the issue of can EI coverage be extended to gig workers? I have a piece that was published recently in Policy Options that is really short, current, and totally accessible. And with my co-author, Colin Busby, the Institute to Research in Public Policy, we argue that a step in the right direction would be to try to get more and more gig workers covered under the labor code, so they're more like employees rather than self-employed people. There is no official definition of what constitutes gig workers as far as Statistics Canada is concerned. The dividing line between self-employment and gig employment is quite fuzzy from both a legal point of view. I think some changes are possible there, and from a practical point of view. And we should note that some gig workers have other jobs, and so some gig workers are just moonlighting. An advantage would be major welfare gains, as we economists say, for certain gig workers in the face of unpredictable shocks beyond their control, which leave them unemployed temporarily. And ideally, it would be desirable to at least partially plug a hole in the social safety net that does not cover gig workers. However, there are many challenges that would be involved. There are hardly any instances in the industrialized world where governments provide unemployment insurance benefits to self-employed workers. I fear that many would opt out of it if given the opportunity. So we might have to make participation mandatory in the interests of solvency. That would definitely spur some opposition. We have to wrestle with the issue of eligibility, for instance. Eligibility would have to be based on prior earnings as the unit of account. It's far more administratively convenient for employment insurance when we base eligibility on hours worked as the unit of account.
Can I get you to wrap it up there, Mr.
Yes, okay. I fear as though we would likely see the provision of insurance altering the employment and unemployment outcomes. It would likely encourage a higher level of separations, sometimes in the form of quits, other time in the form of layoffs, higher than the counterfactual, more than what would otherwise be the case. Ideally, we want to cover losses which are totally unavoidable from the viewpoint of the employer as well as from the employee. And there are a lot of details which would have to be ironed out. We would have to experiment maybe with a pilot project or two to gauge the values for the level of earnings that are covered, the percentage of prior earnings that would be covered, the length of the prior contribution period, and the length of the benefit entitlement period.
Thank you, Mr. Gray.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You will, I'm sure, get a chance to elaborate more once we go to questions. Next, we're going to go to le Conseil national des chômeurs et chômeuses. Oh, non, je m'excuse. Le Conseil d'intervention pour l'accès des femmes au travail.
Intervention Council for access to the job market to women.
Hello, I understand my colleague's microphone problem has not been resolved. I believe my microphone problem has been resolved. Can you hear me? We hear you, but we're not sure that the quality of your sound is good enough for the interpreters. Let's do a last test with Ms. Rose. 30 seconds, please.
Nous, on aimerait attirer votre attention sur 2 points qui sont discriminatoires à l'égard des femmes. Et j'aimerais signaler aussi que notre mémoire a été signée par 17 groupes de femmes, coordonnés par le Conseil d'intervention pour l'accès des femmes au travail, qui est le principal organisme au Québec qui œuvre dans l'accès des femmes au travail et pour les droits des femmes au travail. Alors, moi, je vais parler du premier point qui est la limite de 50 semaines lorsque une prestataire combine les prestations spéciales et les prestations régulières. Alors, vous devriez savoir qu'actuellement, il y a un cas, ou en fait 6 cas et plusieurs autres devant le tribunal administratif du travail. J'ai rédigé une longue expertise là-dessus si jamais le comité est intéressé à le voir. Donc, c'est un problème qui existe depuis très longtemps. Il y a déjà eu plusieurs cas devant les tribunaux qui datent d'il y a 20-30 ans. Actuellement, la limite de 50 semaines affecte surtout les femmes parce que ce sont elles qui prennent la grande majorité des prestations de maternité et parentale. Et si elles se trouvent en chômage quand elle a fini son congé, elles ne sont pas admissibles aux prestations. Pourtant, souvent...
Point of order, Chair. I'm so sorry. There's no translation. I've been patiently waiting, but there's still no translation. Sorry, Chair.
No, I just received a note to that effect. It's the quality of the sound that the interpreters are unable to translate. Donc, je regrette de vous informer.
I regret to inform you, Ms. Rose, that we will give the floor now to Ms. Brown, and she will continue. I don't know where Ms. Rose left off, but you do have our written brief. It is in 2 parts. There's the issue of the limit of 50 weeks, and that is what Ms. Rose was speaking about. It discriminates against women because of that 50-week limit. As to what I want to discuss, I want to discuss the eligibility hours, which are also discriminatory. Earlier, our colleague in the first panel talks about this, but this criterion discriminates against women. Why? Because, as you know, women are the majority of part-time workers, and you have a high percentage of women part-time workers, and it's not by choice, it's by obligation. Women are more take care of domestic work, their children, their elder care, and this is certainly not something that can be ignored during a pandemic. So the criterion on the number of hours is discriminatory. We would like an eligibility criterion that is hybrid. So you have 2 possibilities to be eligible, the hours worked or the weeks worked. With a weekly eligibility, you would have For example, someone with the same experience, the same number of hours of work, even with that, women have less access than men. So therefore, as far as we're concerned, the hybrid criteria would meet our concerns. Now, our position is well spelled out in our brief, and it's accompanied by a table. We provide an example of the difference between a part-time woman worker and a part-time male worker. And we explain why the system discriminates against women. Do I have any time left? Yes, 30 seconds. I would invite you to please read our brief. Ms. Rose did talk about the 50 weeks, and we have now before the tribunal a case, and what we need is a system that takes into account women's needs. Thank you very much, Ms. Brown. Let's start with our members' questions, and I'll start with the Conservatives. Ms. Duncho, please. 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here and for being patient with all the translation issues. Appreciate that. I have a few questions for Mr. Gray. Mr. Gray, I've been reading quite a bit of your research, and it's just excellent. So I'd love to hear a little bit more of some of your thoughts on EI reform. You, in one article, you called that for new voluntary EI programs to bring self-employed and gig workers into the EI system, but you sort of mentioned it that it should be voluntary and not required. Can you just expand on why that is?
You are quite right that I have changed my stance a little bit for today. The reason why we recommend in that article that it should probably be voluntary is because we think that a lot of people will opt out of it. The reason why I said today that we might have to make it mandatory is to avoid an issue of what we economists call adverse selection, whereby those gig workers who face the highest risk of income security in the future, yeah, they'll opt into it. But those who are the most confident about their income security going forwards will opt out. And so we will have only higher risk, relatively higher risk gig workers enrolling, and the relatively lower risk ones, at least as they perceive it, at least as they forecast, opting out of it. And so we have mandatory coverage for EI in order to try to get around that adverse selection problem. Very well known to insurance applicants, all types of insurance. So I see that as sort of an economic and political issue.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you very much for the compliment. I really wasn't expecting that.
Well, all MPs endeavor to research their witnesses, and we appreciate you being here and sharing your wisdom. And thank you to all the witnesses for taking time to be here. And Mr. Gray, I did also want to ask you a few more things. You know, you recently wrote as well that the pandemic is a unique event, and I'm just quoting you here, and we caution the federal government to not dramatically redesign EI in response to this somewhat temporary situation. Can you elaborate on that further as well for committee members?
Yeah, the outcome for the labor market is just very, very different. So we have a big drop in demand. During the last session, they were talking a lot about the big drop in demand, but we also have a drop in supply with businesses just being totally closed or businesses being partially open, but workers, often for very, very good reason, fearful of showing up to work. So we've got supply side constraints as well as demand side constraints. That's not been the case before. Even with the Great Depression, that wasn't the case before. And so the reasons why people are out of work. There are a number of reasons why people are out of work right now. And going forwards, I think that the unemployment insurance system, yes, it needs to be adjusted for the 21st century, both with the passive benefits like we're talking about now, but also with the training, retraining, skills development. Perhaps that's for another session. But that's a challenge that I feel very, very strongly about as well.
Okay, thank you. And the minister of this department of EI mentioned, I believe it was last week. The weeks are all blending together, but last week she alluded to the need to sequence upcoming EI reforms due to the age of the system. So, in your perspective, and you kind of touched on this as well, but can you, for the committee, just provide some of your areas that you think the government should prioritize in this sequencing?
Oh, I'm in favor of doing away with this sort of one-size-fits-all administrative apparatus and creating a number of more specialized programs. Oh, and by the way, I really sympathize with what Ms. Brown was saying about part-time workers. Part-time workers are not treated nearly as well as part-year workers are, for example. So someone who works 50 weeks a year at 20 hours per week is not nearly as well treated as someone who works, only a certain part of the year at full time. So I'm in favor of more specially designed unemployment insurance regimes.
Okay, well, thank you.
For example.
That's excellent. And we just have a few seconds left. So can you just provide for the committee what you believe the core responsibilities are for EI in 2021 and beyond? In 10 seconds.
Okay, I'll talk just about the passive benefits rather than the active benefits. With the passive benefits, we want to cover the risk of sort of idiosyncratic risk of job loss, and certainly the job loss caused by recessions, cyclical unemployment, a system which is not too costly because we don't have trillions of dollars, to fund it, and that, is consistent with a flexible, dynamic, yet equitable labor market.
Thank you, Mr. Gray, and thank you, Ms. Doncho. Next, Mr. Long, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, and thank you to our witnesses. Very, very interesting presentations. And Mr. Gray, my questions will be to you too. I want to thank you very much for your advocacy and I too have read up in your articles about you calling for reform.
Monsieur le Président, on nous indique.
Mr. Chair, it's been indicated that the interpreter is not able to interpret for technical reasons.
The interpreters are having some problem with the. Are you using the House of Commons issued headset? Mr. Long?
Is that better now?
I think so, yes.
Okay, well, hopefully I can have my time back.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Well, thanks, Chair, and good afternoon to my colleagues. And Mr. Gray, my questions will be to you also. I want to thank you for your advocacy and your calling for reform. I too have read your articles and I'm quite interested with what you have to say. My experience certainly, as an MP in St. John Rosse was that the EI system was there. It covered everybody that needed it. And save a few problems, it was very, very adequate. And obviously then came COVID. And, we were getting calls into our office won't name names, but people that were performers. And
like my daughter?
Well, it wasn't your daughter. There were some, wonderful performers here that perform at some local pubs, and we have a wonderful Imperial Theater, etc. But, they were telling their stories to us. And, obviously it became abundantly clear that there were so many that weren't covered. And they deserved to be covered, and they had good careers and performed and what have you and made livings. But when COVID came, when the feet was taken out underneath them, they didn't have coverage. And I think it showed obviously the shortcomings in EI, that obviously not every worker was covered, and nor can everyone who is covered get benefits when they need them. So, I think it's clear that obviously reform was needed. And certainly, again, in your articles, you're quoted as saying that, the system needs reform, but, and correct me, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but don't just do it because of COVID, kind of take a longer view and do the right reforms. So I want to initially talk to you about just EI access, and I'm hoping you could provide some insight to the committee regarding the average worker's ability access to EI benefits and some of the more common issues that currently exist. As you may be aware, Budget 2021 proposes to make EI more accessible and simple for Canadians through a 420-hour common entrance requirement for regular and special benefits, with a 14-week minimum entitlement for regular benefits, and a new common earnings threshold for fishing benefits. When it comes to access, what type of impact do you feel these changes announced in Budget 2021 will have?
Somewhat minor, because the figure which is always thrown around regarding EI coverage of how 80% of the unemployed workers were covered circa 1990, and now only 40% of them are covered. Most of that is people who have entered the labor force but haven't contributed to the regime in the prior 12 months. So I certainly have no problem with reducing the entry requirements. They really should be uniform throughout the land. The preceding witness mentioned that we're the only country that has these geographically variegated program parameters. He's right about that. And so just for the sake of simplicity, lowest common denominator, I'm okay with that, but that's not going to make a major difference with the access. And as far as those splendid performance from your neck of the woods are concerned, do you think that they would be willing to? They obviously are attached to the labor force, right? So
yes,
these are not people who work 2 months a year and then take the next 10 months. I mean, these are people who are career performers.
Absolutely.
Do you think that they would be willing to contribute? Readily. That's what we would need. We would need people to be able and willing to contribute readily into such a regime for the sake of solvency and efficiency.
Yeah, I think here, I can't speak right across the country, but it was alarming the amount of people that just literally had no coverage at all. And, obviously, we made changes, as you know, through COVID with respect to eligibility and
length, right,
yeah. And then obviously CERB and other benefits to make sure that they were covered, because, obviously, we learned as we went on, but they deserved coverage. Mr. Gray, you talked in your presentation about a pilot project that I believe you propose, or a pilot project that you would like to see happen. Can you elaborate on that a little more, please?
Well, that's a frequent...
Briefly, if you can, Mr. Gray.
Yeah, that's a practice of ESDC for decades and decades now. Just about any reform, even small ones, are tested by pilot projects only in certain EI administrative regions. And I think that's a very, very sound practice, as long as they choose a representative set of areas. Don't take just the high unemployment ones. Don't take just the low unemployment ones. But yeah, you got to try that out, because it's easier said than done, to devise an efficient scheme that's going to be solvent and that's not going to drain resources away from other unemployed workers, for example.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Thank you, Mr. Long.
Gray. Thank you, Chair.
Madame Chabot, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. Madame Rose, it is such a pity we're unable to hear from you. My questions are for the collective. I would like to salute the work of your organization to ensure that women don't become victims of discrimination with a program such as employment insurance, part of our social safety net. You've given examples. We know that the plan is very complex and not everybody is familiar with the mechanics. Now, when you talk about combining the two types of benefit, the 50 weeks, I believe you're talking about the regular benefits as well as the special benefits. So you're talking about combining the two. And I will try to give an example, and you correct me if I'm wrong. But if we take maternity leave, which is, there is parental leave, but the maternity leave, which can be of 50 weeks, my understanding is that those are the weeks when you're on maternity leave and they are not insurable to be able to be eligible for other programs such as regular benefits. And we saw during the pandemic crisis, during maternity leave, if your job disappeared, women on maternity leave just ended up with nothing. Can you give me examples of how we could resolve this situation? Actually, that is a good example you've given, and it's exactly that. So, under the law, the number of weeks of benefits is limited to 50 when you have the combination of regular and special benefits. So, of course, we're very concerned about Quebec women when they get the Quebec parental leave benefits, and oftentimes a woman during the maternity leave learns that her position has been abolished. In theory, an employment insurance program should take into account contributions and guarantee protections. But no, that individual cannot receive benefits. The woman must find another job while they're on maternity leave, and to require that of a woman makes no good sense. A new mother is, taking care of her newborn. So that is why we believe it is discriminatory. And the easiest example to understand is when a woman is on maternity leave, learns that her position is abolished, and is not entitled to employment insurance benefits. And I believe you have a solution to that. Could you tell us about the solution? Well, ultimately, the solution is to abolish this 50 weeks. That would enable women to access benefits when they're entitled. Thank you. Now, for women and youth, and we know that youth have been very much negatively affected by the pandemic. I mean, when you look at jobs numbers and compare rates, employment insurance with the criteria, which is based on the number of hours and a variable criteria at that. And you could have 420 up to 700 hours according to the region. But my understanding, based on what you've explained, is a self-employed working full-time 40 hours will qualify more easily than someone who works 15 hours a week. Yes. What will happen is a woman will also receive less money. So women are more negatively affected. If we were to adopt eligibility criteria that is hybrid, either hours worked or weeks worked, you wouldn't have that type of discrimination, and the woman would receive the benefits she needs. Now, for the number of weeks, have you identified a minimum number of hours, or is it really just the number of weeks that would be taken into account? Well, our recommendation is recommendation 3, and we would have a minimum required benefits, either 420 hours or of either 35 weeks of regular benefits. Do you have any proposals to make about income replacement? Honestly, I'm not sure which recommendation is. Ms. Rose and I separated our presentation very equitably, so I've been taken by surprise, and I can't answer. Well, then I'm going to address some of the issues more broadly. I much appreciate your brief, and thank you for this contribution to the work of our committee. And thank you, Ms. Chabot.
Ms. Gazan, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed Mr. Gray's hand is up.
Seulement un commentaire très rapide. Je suis.
Just a very quick comment. I am entirely in agreement with the proposal to either the number of hours or the number of weeks for qualifying for employment insurance. The 1996 reform was a good reform, but it ended up favoring seasonal workers, and it did not favor part-time workers.
Thank you, Chair. I thought that was a point of order. Sorry. Okay. Is my time starting now? Okay, sure. Perfect. Yep. So my first question, I'd like to thank, first of all, the witnesses for being here. And my first question is for the Council d'Intervention pour l'accès des femmes au travail. How was that? I hope that was okay. So my question is about childcare. Yesterday, the federal government announced a national childcare program, something I might add that has been promised over 20 years, but 28 years, but a welcomed announcement is that. I can't tell you how frustrating it is for me, talking about EI reforms, which are great, but I think we also have to acknowledge that EI was a system that was set up for white working males back during the Great Depression, and now we see women, and we see the impact of the pandemic being particularly impacted on women, particularly BIPOC women, in terms of healthcare sectors that are just getting hit hard with COVID on the front lines. the National Child Care Program, of course, as you know, was inspired by the Quebec program. Can you talk to the committee a little bit about the strength of Quebec's affordable child care program and how it's critical and how it will benefit workers, particularly women?
C'est sûr que c'est pas nécessairement.
That was not a part of the brief, but for our organization, and Ms. Kazan, you did very well with pronouncing the name of our organization, but to foster women's place in the job market, women need a place to take care of their children, and the Quebec Child Care Program enables women to integrate the workforce with affordable childcare spaces. In Quebec, we have a shortage of spaces. It's a crisis, but the national program will certainly have an impact on the EI program, and that's why it's important to examine it, because thanks to the National Child Care Program, more women will access the job market. So we'll have to revisit the employment insurance requirements. The 1990 reform benefited a certain sector of the workforce, basically men. So the program is not designed for women. In fact, it discriminates against women. Thank you.
I thank you so much for your comments, and I agree entirely with that. Your organization also proposed increasing the replacement to 60% that was before the 1990s. Why do you propose this increase, and how do you see it more specifically impacting women?
Oui, ben pour
Our recommendation number 7 in our brief speaks to this. There will be a direct impact for women's access to the workforce. So what we need to do is ensure continuity in income when an event prevents someone from continuing to earn. The fact of increasing to 60% would resolve these problems.
And I would probably note, and I wonder if you agree, that we've witnessed this during COVID, that, you know, as a result of kids having to stay home, that's often placed on the responsibility of female caregivers more often. Certainly a really, you know, being proven right now in the midst of pandemic. My next question is for Mr. Gray. So why do you believe that the entitlement to an EI regular benefit should be determined by changes in the provincial employment rate rather than the unemployment rate in the different EI economic regions?
Because that's a more accurate indicator of a shock of something bad happening in the labor market. A reduction in employment, a drop in labor demand, the availability of jobs and the availability of job openings, vacancies.
Yes. So how would that roll out in terms of a program? Like you indicate that you should be determined in changes by provincial employment rate. So how would the federal government support that concept?
It would be a pretty, administratively, it would be a pretty easy change for them to make. It's easier to calculate the employment rate than it is to calculate the unemployment rate for each of these administrative areas. And our point was that we want the system to be able to adjust more quickly when there's a major drop, downturn in the labor market. And we were sort of inspired by what happened in Alberta in 2014. When even though it was Canada's richest province, they got hit really, really hard with a big drop in the price of crude oil. And the system was really, really slow to adjust because it was based on the unemployment rate, which was rising much more slowly than the employment rate was dropping. So that's an illustration that we use to support our case.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Ms. Gazan, next we're going to go to Ms. Falk, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to thank all the witnesses for contributing to our study and also making the time out of your schedules and your lives for being here. And we know that as we navigate through this pandemic and we work towards recovery, it's important that the government is focused on job creation and connecting Canadians with available jobs, while also ensuring that the benefits are there for those who are going to need them. And part of ensuring that those benefits continue to exist is ensuring the sustainability of the program. And last week at our committee, we had heard from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, who suggested that no permanent changes be made to the EI program until our economy has recovered. They also had raised concerns about the impact that higher payroll taxes would have on our economic recovery. Mr. Gray, I had noted that in your open letter last fall to Minister Qualtrough, you had suggested that the EI program should not necessarily be redesigned to meet the stress test for a shock of the magnitude of this pandemic. Are there specific program structures in the temporary COVID support programs that you would suggest not to be incorporated permanently into our EI program?
Yeah, that's exactly what I think. So the Canadian Emergency Response Benefits and its replacement, it's really my hope that come later this year, we'll have maybe not full employment, but we'll really have adequate job openings. Right now, we're about 300,000 positions short of where we were in the good old days of February of 2020. And so I'm hoping that all of these extraordinary measures will be obviated, the need for them will be obviated, and we can go back to a reformed employment insurance system, Part 1 and Part 2 for the 21st century. It is unsustainable. With a deficit of $350 billion, that's like World War II. I wasn't around back then. But we cannot go on with expenditures, with outlays anywhere near that magnitude for more than another 4 or 5 months or so. Mm-hmm. Even though fiscality is not my primary area of expertise.
I do note, Mr. Gray, as well, that when we had Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, they had the recommendation that no new permanent changes be introduced until our economy recovers. And I did note that similarity in your opening remarks. I'm just wondering if you could explain further as to why.
I suppose because the labor market situation will be very, very different. Hopefully we'll be back to normal. And so before we make any changes, and yeah, I am in favor of expansion in certain areas, no overlap. no transition. When the war against the pandemic ends, yes, we move on to a recovery phase with different imperatives and different policy objectives. Get people vaccinated so that everyone can go back to work safely. We're going to have a certain number of workers who will be permanently laid off. Yeah, get them into training as soon as possible. But
And
I don't want cancer.
I guess on that point, what would you say the priorities in reform would be once we come to recovery?
At a very broad level, a recognition that the unemployed are just very, very heterogeneous. Someone mentioned a little while ago, and I agree totally, system designed for full-time, mostly Caucasian, white-collar workers in the 1940s and 1950s. We have these different types of unemployment, workers with different attributes in different situations. I'm hoping for a system that's that can be compartmentalized a bit more to address more specific and particular needs of different unemployed workers.
Thank you, Ms. Falk, and thank you, Mr. Gray. That is the time we have for questions today. I want to sincerely thank our witnesses for being with us. Madame Rose, je suis absolument...
Madame Rose, I really sincerely apologize for the technical problems with Zoom. That kind of problem occurs from time to time. And your colleague very well represented your organization, and we much appreciate the work done by your organization.
Ably managing the situation. So thanks again to our witnesses. You're welcome to go. There's just a couple of things that I need to raise with the members before we adjourn. Colleagues, we have one more panel of witnesses on the EI study coming up this Thursday. The second hour of the meeting will be dedicated to drafting instructions. I believe it would be helpful to the committee if the analysts provided us with a draft outline that would help inform our discussions around drafting instructions. If you're okay with that, we can so direct them. Any issue with having the analysts provide us with a draft outline for our drafting instructions on Thursday?
No, not at all.
I see consensus. And finally, by Friday, you will have the latest draft of the Urban, Rural, and Northern Indigenous Housing Study. Please submit whatever changes you propose in advance so that our discussions can be a little more efficient, translated, and the like. That would be greatly appreciated. That's all I have. Is it the will of the committee to adjourn?
Mr. Chair, I just had one clarification.
Ms. Doncho, go ahead.
Thanks. Just when could we expect the drafting instructions from the analysts?
Well, actually, we're going to issue the drafting instructions, but are you talking about the draft outline?
Yeah, just what you had mentioned,
sure.
and we sort of tacitly agreed to. I'm just wondering the timeline for that.
Yeah. Okay. Can you help us, Eleni,
yeah.
when we might see that?
Yes. So the draft outline would be sent out tomorrow afternoon, along with the briefing note for the panel for Thursday's meeting.
Thank you, Elaine.
Okay. Is it the will of the committee to adjourn? I see consensus. We're adjourned. See you Thursday. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, I had raised my hand. I do apologize, Ms. Chabot. Go ahead. I won't take it personally. I agree with you regarding the final report on Indigenous housing. And if we could forward our comments, that will be helpful. But to be able to do that, we'll wait to get the other version. Once we have the recommendations. So I hope, I know it probably doesn't comply with the 48-hour rule, but I mean, to be able to do so, we absolutely do need to receive the version from the last committee meeting. I agree, and that's why I mentioned it. Thanks, Ms. Chabot.
Adjourned. See you Thursday.